We need a traffic reporter. So they get in, but they really want to be a jock, or a talk show host. So it's getting your foot in. So it doesn't matter if you get in the finance department or in administration. Once you're in the environment, that's how I got in. I got in as a technical operator. And in those days, everything was still analog. There was no digital. So it was all like reel-to-reel tapes and LPs. And, you dealt with that stuff. And I was a desk operator. I used to run the desk in the studio. That's how I got in. So getting into like an existing station is an important thing. And obviously, being at a commercial station is the best part, is a game. But getting into a well-run campus station or a well-run community station is just as good. But I know I've done a lot of training, and Chris will back me up on this. In the community stations, they're really badly run. They lack resources. Things are made up on the spur of the moment. It's really not as professional as some. I know some community stations that run like clockwork. Like if you go to Radio Bushbuck Ridge up in Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Limpopo border there, that place is really like well run. There's a lot of like campus stations that are already like well run. So if you can't get into commercial, the SABC is another thing, but with all its problems and everything, we can't even afford the guys who work at the SABC because the salaries are just so out of kilter. I know people that have dropped their salaries to get out of the SABC. So if you want to get in, get in somewhere. If you can't get into your place you want to, try get in like somewhere else. But you're in. And once you're in that environment, you start meeting people, you get to know people. I used to do demos in the off-air studio like at night when no one was there. And then a year later, I got a chance to stand in for someone on an all-night show, and that's how I got on. But after spending 12 years on air, I realized that I wasn't never going to do drive shows. I was never going to be Monday to Friday. I was always going to be nighttime or weekends. So get off air, because I didn't have a career, kind of thing, like being a presenter, because there were just too many other good guys, So, then I got into music research and the music department, and that's how I got into managing music and that type of stuff. And then your career starts building, but you've got to get in like somewhere. And it is difficult because every station has a finite amount of positions available. Here, the finance guys go, 50% of our budget is now paying salaries. That's too much. It should be in the region of 40%, which means you're employing too many people. Because we're a commercial station. There's a thing in our board pack when we present to the board. They go, every month, cost per employee and profit per employee. So if your cost goes up, if there's too many people or your salaries are too high, it'll reflect in that. And if they go profit per employee, so if we make a loss, not a loss, but if we don't reach our target, say we're supposed to make 20 million rand this month, and we only make 18 million rand, then the cost to the profitability of each employee will go down. So people worry about that. So they're looking at numbers, they're looking at how many people in departments, they're trying to squeeze more value out of employees. And the way we employ people is a bit old school. It's like you come and you get a job, and you get a job description and a job profile, and then that's your job. But actually the way like radio works now is, if you want to be involved in content where we are, you need skills like content curation. You've got to be able to produce, write, you've got to know the technical stuff like video editing, audio editing, and you need to know how to curate stuff like online, back ends of websites, social media, all that type of stuff. How to verify stories, fake news, fake photographs. You need all those skills. So we're looking for a skill set in one person who can do all those jobs, as opposed to having a digital person, a producer, and an online person or a digital person. You need all that in one person. They need to do all of it. So those kind of skills, you can learn the technicalities and the theory, but applying them here is like a bit different. Things are more fluid. And I'm not a person like that for hierarchies. Like there is an organogram, who sits where and who reports to who. But I want to see the place work in teams. That there are teams that do things. So the news guys may have 12 bulletins to do between 6 in the morning and 6 at night, but they can come to Khomotso and Namiso in the studio and go, hey, I saw this, I've got an audio piece, I've put something together, or I've seen something, here's the guy's number, call this guy, here's a list of questions for you guys. So people have been able to work anywhere. They can go to the digital guys and go, I can write you an 800 like word piece on something. Or they could, so yeah, people need to be multi-adaptable across all these platforms, across the on-air and the online things. Having a job description that says, you know, you're the digital this or you're the content this, yeah, that's part of the HR-like process, but you need to be far more flexible in the way that you acquire skills and how you place them around a radio station.
When you come here, like on a daily basis, you work on like business that's coming in, or you just try and upgrade the ones that you already have?
In what sense?
Like maybe the jingles, so the IDs. Do you like normally upgrade them, or you have like a certain period whereby like I will change them after a certain time? Yeah.
Part of imaging is it needs to be up to date most of the time. But mostly they will come from producers of shows if they would want anything to be changed from their shows, because also what producers also do is that they've got standard features that they'll always create depending on the content of the information that they have. So if they're going to change imaging in terms of the stings, jingles is how you mentioned it, they have to brief it to us. That is part of programming, briefing production, to have all of that done. We also write part of that as well. So if they're going to have a feature that is going to be running on their show and they need to have imaging for that feature, then they'll brief it to us and then we do that with the station force.
So working for a radio newsroom has got a lot of challenges, and you've got to have it all together. You've got to remember a lot of things in the shortest space of time, and making sure that when you go on air, your story is like perfect. It ticks all the boxes of ethics, of accuracy, of balance. You know, if you say this person did this, then the person has got a right of reply, right? So, and there are also other pressures of the kind of language we use when we write about stories about rape, about gender-based violence, you know. So there are a lot of pressures in a radio newsroom, which basically means that you have to be well informed, right? You've got to be well informed. You've got to know stuff about stuff. You really, really have to know. I know you're all young, but unfortunately, if you work in this industry, things that happened before you were born matter. They do, right? Because apartheid happened before you were born, but it matters now. So you always have to go back. As an example, why do we have affirmative action laws, for instance? That's because apartheid, you know, did not give black people the right to education, the right to whatever. You've got to know that, so that you can make your listeners understand why this law is important. Do you know how there's always debate around, okay, another example, the death penalty. If you were to write a story about, I mean, people are now calling for the death penalty. You have to know why the death penalty is not constitutional in South Africa. Why we don't have the death penalty. If you don't know why we don't have the death penalty, you won't be able to tell people why maybe it's wrong for people to call for the death penalty. Or how do people justify calling for the death penalty? You see what I mean? Yeah, so you need to know everything about everything. But don't be so scared, because you guys live in an era where everything is at your fingertips. All you have to do is research. So never ever just take a story on face value and write it. Okay, you need to do your research. Like as an example that I made about International Day of the Girl Child. You need to know things like how many girls in South Africa are forced to marry. Ukutwala, what. How many girls in South Africa don't go to school? Why are girls not going to school? Some of the reasons are because they look after sick relatives, because they've been married off to somebody. I don't know, because they don't have money to buy sanitary pads, so they don't go to school. You've got to know all those things, so that when you want to make your story stronger and speak to your audience, you then know, okay, I'm going to tell people about the challenges that girls in South Africa face. But these are the things that I'm going to use to demonstrate the challenges. the sanitary pad campaigns. I'm sure you all know about sanitary pad campaign. The ukutwala, whatever, the rape. So then you go and do your research, but you do your research because you already know the bigger picture. And then you just narrow it down to fit into a 45-second news piece. It goes back to ethics, okay? So never ever take anything that is written on face value, okay? You have to do your research. So as an example, so breaking news does not give you the license to write fake news. So you can't, and it happens a lot, something breaks on Twitter, I don't know, some famous person has died. Have you heard about it? And it would be wrong, right? So imagine if I just took something from Twitter and say, oh, this person has died. So it's best to go and verify it first, which is it's like an ethical issue. You have to verify. You have to independently ascertain that, yes, this person has died. If you are not sure, you cannot go on air with it. Hi FM is a business entity, right? The Star newspaper is a business entity, okay? The Business Day is a business entity. So the owners of those businesses, in a way, they control what goes into their newspaper. Okay? They may not necessarily control news as in going to the news editor and saying, write this way about the Minister of Health, or write this way about the Freedom Front Plus. But by the nature of the people that they are targeting, they control the news that they put out, because they are producing this newspaper for a certain type of person. Okay? The person who reads the Business Day, as an example, is the person who drives a BMW, right? Who is rich or is of middle income, right? So they are interested in certain kind of stories. They're interested in politics, they're interested in holidays, they're interested in climate change. So the Business Day will go and gather those kind of stories that target their person. So in a way, there is a form of control there. But it does not necessarily mean that the material itself, like nobody's going to tell you at the Business Day to take some facts out of a story. So, yeah, but do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the news editor has the final say, well, to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, because it's a money-making enterprise, there's an element of control there. So that's number one. Number two, the majority of news outlets in South Africa are for rich people, for people who can afford to go and buy the newspaper, right? People in urban areas because they can tune into radio, whatever. People in rural areas, for instance, there are areas in South Africa where only the SABC has a signal. So those people can only consume news from SABC radio or SABC TV. Okay, but the other form of control is, it can be subtle as well, right? When I write my bulletins, I've got 3 minutes to put a bulletin together. So there's a form of control there because I can only fit in how many stories in a 3-minute bulletin? 3 or 4, yeah. So already the structure of the business is somehow controlling, but it does not necessarily mean that my boss can come and say, you know, I don't want you to run that story, because then I will say no, but no. I won't tell you that.
So that is different.
No, not a kind of effort. And if it happens, I will have a word with my boss.